Hello, and thank you for joining me for today's Criterion Learning Series presentation. I am Steve Tompkins, Principal Solutions Architect with Criterion, and today we're going to be showing you the salary grades and salary steps within Criterion. So let's go ahead and get started here. While I'm switching uh, my browser over, I did want to mention, of course, we do have a chat and we have a Q&A that you can use if you do have any questions along the way, and we can address those questions. And if we're not able to get back to you during the call today, what we'll do, of course, is follow up with you when as soon as we can. Support will reach out to you and we'll follow up. So hang on one moment here. I can't find my browser. Here we go. All right. So apologize for that delay there. So salary grades and everything. I do want to point out where we can see this in self-service, but this is definitely a function that is set up in the back end, and there's not a lot of user employee interaction with it. But an employee may have a salary grade that shows here on their position screen, and of course in their position history, possibly if they have an additional position, it would show in there. So you can kind of see where this would be visible here within self-service. But of course, as I mentioned, the configuration of it's going to happen in the back end of the system. So I actually have a few tabs open here because I want to talk about how this works here. So the first one, we want to look at our user code tables, which are available under system configuration and code tables right here. And want to talk about what we call the salary group. So if you scroll down, you'll actually see three things that are related to salary grades. You may not use, salary steps if you use a grade where you just put in the high and the low. So this one you might not need, but the salary group as well as the salary grades are things you would want to. You're going to need salary groups at a minimum, depending on how you have them set up. So let's look at salary groups first. So when we are looking at salary groups, this is where we tell it how does this work. Now you may not have these here; these are ones that I've configured. So you can kind of see how these work here. And of course, the code and the names would be your own code and names. So I actually have three here: grade only, in range. I'll explain that in a second. And I have one that's for outside range allowed, and then steps. And so let's talk about this. So with a salary grade, you may want to enforce the minimum and maximum. So if you had it go from, let's just say, $60,000 a year to $80,000 a year, if you say you want it to be within the range only, so somebody would not be able to make less than 60,000 or more than 80,000 if you tried to enter that in on an employee record, a pop-up message would come up and not let you save because it's outside of the 60 to 80,000. So that's where you can uh, set that right here. You see this override grades. Now I do want to talk about the grade type. One is a grade. So in other words, I put in like the minimum and maximum, and 0 is a step. So that's what this code means here. And you'll see that when I go into the step one, you'll see this will show 0. But the override will allow you to go outside of the range. So in this situation, I have the grade type of 1, which means it's a grade with a minimum and maximum. And then override allows me to go outside. So I have a 0 there saying basically no. All right. And so that's how that works there. And you'll see another example. This one I do allow outside. So again, it's a grade type of 1, which is a grade, high and low, and then we can go outside. So my example previously where I had 60,000 to 80,000, if I tried to put 85,000, it would be okay. and the system would allow me to save that. It would let me know that it was outside the range, but it let me save that. And then here you'll see an example of a salary step. So the grade type is 0 there. So the step means that um, the grade type means that you're going to allow the step. So those are defined steps. The uh, employee or the administration may want to set up, let's say, again, using my 60, 80,000, you may want to say 60,000, 65, 70, 75, and 80,000 are your steps. You cannot go outside of those. We cannot do the override when you're doing a step. Right, so that's what that is for right there. All right, so once you have these configured, you can set up either, and let me just have over here, salary grades, where you can set up one or more. Now you can of course set these up even if you have a salary step. You can add these codes. The system won't stop you from adding the codes if you're doing step only. But if you're doing grades, which again is the high to low, you can have one or more grades right here. You can do whatever you want as far as the code and description. So you'll see like food vendor, merchandise sales, etc. And then if you want to have any steps, you would have one right here. So you would set your steps out there for what you're doing, again, with the code and description, like I have 1, 2, 3. All right, now this means I can have 3 steps. So my previous example where I had 60 to 80,000 at $5,000 increments wouldn't work. I'd have to add more steps in that particular situation. All right, so that is what is set up under the code tables here under system configuration. We have these 3 things right here under salary grade, group, and step. Let's show you where you actually set up those grades. That's under HR administration right here. All right, when you come to this, of course, you'll see it is by employer. So you may have several employers, in which case you would select the ones for that appropriate employer. And then you'll see in here, we have the group name. Remember, that's what I just set up, the salary groups. And here's the 3 different ones here. Right. And once I select, whichever one, let's just say only in range, then I can add in the grades that I want to configure. So in this example, I have merchandise sales. Let's say I wanted to add food vendor. Just click it, add it into the list. So super easy to do that right there. When I hit save, it's right there. All right. Now the frequency is for all of the grades here. So if you needed a mixture, let's say you wanted to put an hourly rate for one and a annual salary for another, you would actually have to set up a separate group for each frequency that you would like to configure. So you might call it like annual rate grade or whatever is your group name, and all of those are set up annually. And then you have an hourly rate group, and that one is all set up as hourly or whatever frequency. But I cannot say that this one is hourly and this one is annual within the same setup right here within this group name. Right, and then it's very simple. You'll notice here I have the minimum, $15 an hour and $20 an hour. And of course, food vendor, I can set up whatever this one is. Let's say it's 1450, 14.50 to 1950. All right, so really very easy to enter those in and be able to put in as many different ones as you want. Now, what you may want to do, depending on how your situation is, you may need one for like each job code or something like that. So you'd have to set all those up as different grades and put those out there. Of course, again, in the code table first, and then you can add them into here. So I have like janitor ticket sales, I could add them in. All right, and just to show you this one where I have outside the range, I have this one here. Now this one I have a little bit of an overlap because I got the same one in both. I would say not to do that just because it's very confusing if you use the same name for both of them. Don't do something like this. So in my example, I may want to remove that and have that. Now I can't because it actually is in use. So just letting you know how that works there is if you have one in use, then you cannot remove it here. You'd have to remove it from the employee or the position before you can remove it from here. So let me just clean that up in mind. Let me remove food vendor, and that shouldn't cause a problem. All right. So let's talk about the steps. All right. So here are steps. And what I again would do is I would select the appropriate grade for that. And just to show you, I'll do ticket sales here. And then you would put in the steps. You may remember in the code table, I had step 1, step 2, step 3. And I would have them defined that way there. Here I could choose to enable or disable one. So this is where if you do have maybe some that are 5 steps and others that are 4 or 6 or something like that, you would add in your code table all of the different possibilities for your steps. So if I go back to the code table and I go to steps, I may want to put in here step 4, 5, 6, even though I'm not using it in that particular grade that I'm setting up. All right, so here I'm using 1, 2, 3. If I added in back over here, let's say step 4 as an example, I don't have to use it in this particular setup. I can just say, nope, I'm just going to kind of ignore it for this one and not select it when I go over to the manage steps, just not leave it checked. All right. So now because I've checked 1, 2, 3, I see these. And now I can say ticket sales is, let's say it starts at 15, the next step is 16, and then the final step is 17. Now, if I did want one with, and in fact, this is monthly, let me change this to hourly to be a little more accurate. All right, if I did want to have one with 4 steps, again, what I have to do is make a separate group, maybe call it grade with 4 steps, something like that, and it put in the salaries groups that go in there, and then with the 4 steps. So each time you want to have something a little different, you do need to add separate group names for that. So just again, just to kind of show you, I could do a group here, and I could do, maybe I call it a grade 4, grade 4 steps or something like that. All right. Right. And then again, I can do, 1 or 0 here, depending on what I'm doing, and set that up. That would be, excuse me, that would be a 0. All right. And now go back over to here. I could add a new one in here for 4 step. I would need to just hit refresh to be able to see it. And I could do that 4 step one with 4 steps. Okay. Yeah. I have to set it. Oh, that's because I didn't set it over here. I apologize. I need to set the rate unit. So this is the where it's interesting because this is the rate unit. Then it's a code based off of the code table. It's a little confusing. You may need to reach out to support to know what these codes are. Um, the frequency here, 4373. I'm going to do the same thing there. That allows me to do, I believe, monthly is the code there. It's actually the code table. There's a code table for the frequency, and it's the little code that's in it. Is 4373. That's what that is. Let me go back over to here and refresh, and I'll be able to do that. And there we go. So monthly, and now I can manage my steps. Excuse me, I need to put this in, and I can manage my steps having all 4, and then put in my monthly rates for that. All right, now let me talk about the alternative rates. So we have some clients who have a separate rate for other types of pay. So it might have a higher or lower rate for that other type of pay there. That's what this checkbox is for. You obviously don't need to enable it if you're not using that alternate rate out there. So an example might be for overtime, it's not time and a half, it's some other calculation. And that's what that would be for in this example, or something like that, or a premium pay has an alternate rate. So that's what that's for. If you don't have that, if you're not familiar with that being in your system there, then you don't need to enable that. But that's what that checkbox is for. All right, so you can enable that. All right, now I do want to mention that you can import in salary grades if you want to do that. Let's talk about that just very quickly, and then I'll show you where you can set this up on the actual um, the jobs, the positions, as well as the employees. So if you're familiar with any data imports, they are right here. And we have one here for 1F, which is salary grade. So it's under the core module. 1F is the template name. And I'll show you the spreadsheet template here just real quickly. Let me switch over to Excel. And you'll be able to see this. It allows you to do what I just did within the system, but obviously on an Excel spreadsheet. So if you do already have, like, maybe you were doing some internal approvals and it's been shared in a spreadsheet format, this allows you to import that rather than entering all that information into the system. So this is what that would look like. And you'll see here we have the grade header, the grade detail, and then salary step detail. So depending on whatever you're doing there, you've got those three out there. So the lookup values, if you've never used these templates before, these are the codes that are behind the scenes. So you'll see things that I've already configured. All right, so I've got my groups, all right? Got my salary grades. Here's any existing salary grades, and then my salary steps, and then my salary steps, my salary step groups, excuse me, and my salary steps. So depending on what you're doing there, you're basically doing the exact same thing you would be doing in the system there. So you would go into here for an example, you would give it a code and description, and then you can go into here and you can say, all right, for this employer, let's just choose AFC Richmond. I want to use this salary grade for food in the in range one in my example. And I'm going to set the minimum as, I think I had it as 1450 and 1950. So you could do this in a spreadsheet if that is more convenient for you than doing it in the system. And the same type of thing with the steps. I can go out there again, select the employer. What is again, the position there, the group, and then the steps here. Now this one's a little different because you have to set one for each step along the way. So I would have to do like step one. It doesn't go across. I'd have to go down. So you may want to copy these first three boxes and then do like step one, step two, step three in this example here. If you had to do the import, and then maybe I do 1450, $16 and 1950, something like that. All right, so those might be my steps. And again, the alternate rate, if you needed to do those, you could do that right here. Of course, if you don't have those, you can completely ignore this column. All right, and then of course I would save, I would go back into the system and I can import it in. So after I save, what I would do is use import here, browse to where I saved that file, and then of course import it in. And then of course I probably would want to go and check the salary grades just to make sure it looks exactly like I wanted it to look in there. So let's look at adding this to the position. All right, so any position you want to add a salary grade to, you can do that here. So let's go to food vendor as an example. And you'll notice right here, I have the salary grade already filled in. So the first thing I need to do is select the group that it is in. So let's say I wanted it in steps, select the minimum step and the maximum step if I wanted to do that. All right, so very easy to do that. If it's a grade, I would choose the group again for that. I don't remember if it was in range or out of range. Looks like it was the out of range. And select the range here for the minimum and maximum. Right. That's not the same as the target pay rate. The target pay rate is like the default pay rate when you hire somebody into the position. So maybe it is the low. I don't know. Obviously it's your choice, but it doesn't have to be. This could be, $16. And then sometimes you hire people who are less than 16, but still within the range if you want to, and you do that. All right. And then of course, if I made any changes, I can submit those changes to be saved there, and there may be an approval on what you're doing. All right. And then finally, you would set this up on an employee. Now, maybe when they were hired, it was already filled in on the employee, and so that may already be populated here. But if it was not, like in this example, I could choose the appropriate salary grade for here. Now you'll notice pay rate is not between the min and max. All right, so that is not in there. And I'm allowing that to happen because in my rules, I said they're allowed to be outside the range. So it does tell you that they're outside the range, but it doesn't stop you from being outside the range. If I had done the enforced one, which let me just look real quick, which one is inside the range. I'll go to merchandise sales. Let me show you what happens with that one. Let's find somebody who's a merchandise person. Okay. And now this is inside the range, so no problem. But if I tried to go outside, you'll see here it's in red, letting me know that it is outside the range. It should be between 15 and 20. And right here, it will not let me submit. It's hard for you to tell, but I'm trying to click submit and it's not letting me because it's outside the range. Right. As soon as I go back inside the range, it'll let me save that. So I set it to 20. Now I can hit submit. All right, so that's how that works. The same thing would happen if I was going through a new hire process. And, again, I tried to hire somebody at a $14 an hour or something. I would not be able to go all the way through the new hire and save that person because the pay rate was outside the range. Right. And of course, as I mentioned, the employee may be able to see that over here in self-service. Of course, you can see that here. And it would also go into the position history showing that salary grade. All right. So I didn't see any questions come through, and I don't know. I know we have some people in the room that maybe answered questions, but I think pretty straightforward. The one thing that can get a little tricky, and let me go over that again, is just the configuration of making sure you get the both tables configured as well as that pay rate unit. So again, just to show you how you get there, it is a user table. If you just start typing Sal, it'll come up. You need to at least set up two of these. So if you're using grades, you need to set up a group and set up your grades, and then you can go set up your grades over here. If you're using steps, again, you'll need to set up a group and then the steps. But the key thing here is, there's two things. One is the type, one being grade, zero being steps, the unit here as well. And I looked through the help. I couldn't find this in the help. I don't know if Connor, who's in the room, knows a place to easily see these for the user if they're defined somewhere. Obviously, you can reach out to your support person to help you out. I don't think these are shown anywhere, like in the help, to tell you what the code is right there. Connor, you want to mute if you want to mention anything.
That's probably true, Steve. So we could give somebody the background on what those codes would be, but we'll also take a follow-up to look at that on your side.
I believe it's over here. You go to the frequency, payroll frequency. What is that? Pay rate frequency.
It's already unit based, but
Oh, is it unit?
I think it's unit. Yeah, it's right unit.
Right unit. So it might be if I click into here. See, I can't click into it. And I know any other code I can click in and it tells me up here the code if in the address bar, but these I can't. So I don't have a way of doing these. Now, I have a captive audience here. Let me talk to you about this right here at the Help Center. I would recommend that you might put in a new idea for this and say, hey, rather than a code that is not well defined and visible in the system, why don't we use these codes? So if you would like to put in a request for this, I like to show this for everything, just because this is how we make the system better. You can add a feature request out here. Now, there are feature requests if you haven't been here before is a great place to, come with your ideas. I'm not saying you have to submit this one for this, but maybe you've got a great idea on, I don't know, doing something with somebody's address. I don't know. I'm just picking something out of the air. You can come here and you can create a post for that. So if you are so inclined and you want to make a feature request for how that works, you can make a post out here. You can also go through other people's, you know, requests that are out here. So whatever this year-to-date totals is for Esmeralda, I'm sure it's something good because 4 people have voted for it. You could see this here and you say, oh, this is a great idea. I love this idea, and vote that up. Or maybe you want to add in your own commentary and you can put in here, yes, I also like to see quarter to date. I don't know. You could put in other things in here that maybe would also be useful. And we do take this stuff to heart, as you may be aware if you've been in any of our quarterly release webinars. We're adding these types of things in, every quarter. We pull these types of things out. Like this one here, it's got 9 votes. Pretty good chance we're going to pull this one in and get this into the system. Maybe even the next release. I don't recall, the timeline on there, but these types of things get added to the system very quickly. So we do add those in. We listen to you. So if you think that might be a good idea, or maybe you think there's an even better idea that I'm telling you to say, maybe put in this. Maybe you think the description or a drop down menu, I don't know, would be a good way of doing it. Make that suggestion out there. Anyways, back to this year. If you need these codes, like I said, reach out to support or your partner. We can find out what those codes are for you. I'm assuming they're all going to be somewhere in the 4370s. I don't know what they all are. I guess you could try to just come in here, put in a different thing, and then go back to the rate table, the salary grade table, and see what it shows as a drop down. If it says annual, you found the right one for annual. But yeah, if you have any questions, reach out to us about that. So that is salary grades. I know we have just a couple minutes left. I do want to respect everybody's time as much as I can here. So I just want to quickly bring up our upcoming learning series webinar. And one of the reasons why I covered salary grades, as you may be aware of salary grades, we have the minimum and maximum, but there is a midpoint that you can use to calculate a comp ratio. We're going to talk about that information in compensation management and a lot more. So that is what we're going to be covering here in a couple of weeks on September 11th there. And then we're going to go and talk about notifications. So if you're curious about notifications, how you might want to customize those to be your own, or just how they all work, we'll talk about that here at the end of September on the 25th. And then we're going to dip our toes into recruiting for a couple of learning series webinars before we head off into payroll land and year end and things like that. So this is our upcoming schedule. And I do want to thank you all for joining us today. And if you do have any follow-up questions or you need some help setting up your salary grades, if you're interested, please reach out to us, help@criterionhcm.com. Or if you are working with a partner, please reach out to that partner. They'll be able to answer your questions, and anything they can't answer, they can come back to us and we can help them out. So again, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate your time, and I hope to see you all again in a couple of weeks.